This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Westin. We're going to conclude the week, as we always do, with our special contributor here on Wall Street Week. He is Larry Summers of Harvard. So, Larry, thank you so much for being with us. One of the big developments, I think, of the week really had to do about COVID in so many different ways. But one of them was President Biden speaking to the country late in the week, really setting out a fairly extensive program to sort of almost do a reset on our attack on this pandemic. What do you make of what the president is proposing?
I think he did the right thing. I think this is going to be with us in very serious ways for a very long time, unless we get the vaccination rate up. And what he did is necessary to get the vaccination rate up. I think it's supported by the vast majority of Americans, and I think it will be accepted ultimately by most other Americans. This is like fluoride in the water. This is like the tests that our kids have to take to go to camp or go to school. This is like going through security at airlines. A more complicated and dangerous world requires things that didn't used to be required. And this is an example of that. And we are struck that he's doing it right now. 2 years from now, it'll be hard to imagine a world where there haven't been vaccination requirements good for the administration. I do think that there's a crucial dimension of all of this, which is what's happening globally that is still not getting enough attention. And this has been something I've been focused on for a long time, leading up to the G20 with our panel on that. We need much more global vaccination. We need much more preparation for the next pandemic. And this is the biggest vulnerability for our national security from the rest of the world over the next decade. That the virus mutates, that the virus takes a new form, that a different pathogen comes along, and that we are not ready. That is by far a greater risk of Americans losing their lives prematurely from a foreign threat relative to military conflict, relative to terrorism, even for the next few years, relative to climate change. And we just need a major effort to stop this threat. Remember, Americans right now are dying at a rate of a 9/11 every 2 days. Maximizing our preparedness for threats of that kind, which also means engaging in the global dimension, has to be a central priority for our country. And I hope we'll be moving on to that. I'm encouraged by the reports of what the president is going to be doing during the UN General Assembly meetings. I'm encouraged by the signs, but real and bold U.S. leadership on that issue in conjunction with other countries is, I think, the single most important foreign policy and national security challenge facing our country.
Larry, another significant set of developments over the week has been what's been going on in China and what we're now calling disorderly capital from Beijing. They call it disorderly capital as they continue to clamp down on various parts of their industry. At the same time, President Biden now has reached out to President Xi. They've had a long conversation, although I do note I don't think we have a China policy yet under the Biden administration. What do you make of China? How big a problem is it for the U.S. economy and for U.S. business?
Look, I think the glory days of doing business in China and getting rich for most American businesses were never fully there. And to whatever extent they were there, I think that's going to be very attenuated going forward. The predictability of a Chinese business environment is not anything that anybody's going to be able to rely on for quite a while after the magnitude of the sudden changes. This is surely going to have implications in terms of predictability, in terms of reliability of enforcement, for any idea that the Chinese currency or some Chinese digital currency is going to be a threat to the dollar. And we need to understand that what's happening in China is not mostly about us. It is about the imperatives of cohesion in an extraordinarily complex and very rapidly transforming society. So what we need to do is take the temperature down, demand less, set our most crucial priorities, insist on our core interests, which cannot be every concern that we have, and have a pragmatic relationship with China. It would be a grave mistake if we were to seek across-the-board confrontation with China. It would be a grave mistake if we were to prioritize immediate commercial interests over deeper national security interests. And it would be a grave mistake if we were not prepared to work hard to find elements of common ground. The truth is that China's potential contribution to either global pandemic or to climate change is as great as any other national security challenge they present, and we need to recognize that as we approach China.
Larry, you mentioned the temperature with China. Let's talk about the temperature with inflation back here, something we've talked about pretty much every week here, your concerns about inflation. I see some other people are starting to echo what you said. In fact, we had Ken Rogoff, you pointed out in your tweet, Ken Rogoff wrote on this for Project Syndicate, saying there are some parallels actually with the 60s and 70s, including even our withdrawal, disorderly, I think it's fair to say, withdrawal from Afghanistan, and what happened in Vietnam, what happened with productivity, various aspects. How concerned should we be right now that we could actually have a repeat of the 60s and 70s?
Look, I don't think we're anywhere close to the kind of Carter-era double-digit inflation. But I do think we're in very serious danger of repeating almost all the mistakes of the 1960s and early 1970s. And there's a parallel in a growing chorus of voices saying that accepting more inflation because you've gotten more inflation is the lesser of evils, and that you should just accept more inflation and promise that eventually you will stop it. That, I think, is setting us up for some very substantial difficulties down the road.
And finally, Larry, we're marking, of course, the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the United States. And it's a time for reflection about what happened 20 years ago, but also a time to think about what we've learned in the 20 years in between. What do you think we've learned?
David, I'm going to say something different than a lot of the commentary, which emphasizes the various successes of our response, and I don't disagree with any of that. But I remember asking a very wide range of experts and knowledgeable people in the aftermath of 9/11 what they thought the prospects for terror attacks were over the subsequent period. And I don't think you could have found anyone in the fall of 2001 who would have expected that we would have been as successful in avoiding terrorist attacks in our country and successful in avoiding terrorist attacks in our allies as we have been. And I think all of us who are not directly involved in national defense and national security owe thanks to those who have worn uniforms, those who have protected us, those who have mounted the necessary investigations. And that's a perspective that we need to have, even as we do recognize the many mistakes that we have made.
Okay, Larry, thank you so very much. That's our special Wall Street Week contributor. He's Larry Summers of Harvard.